On this episode of the Credit Line podcast, we're joined by Nir Bashan, a keynote speaker and best-selling author that speaks about creativity, innovation, and problem solving at work. He speaks to frontline staff and to leadership about solving problems with creativity at work, and not just for the creative people. Well, welcome, Nir. I'm glad that you can be on our podcast today, as I know you've been part of our Undercover Credit Conference in St. Louis, and I know you will be in Pittsburgh, and that's really exciting. Unfortunately, I will not be there. I'm only going to the Chicago one, but I've heard a lot of great things about you, and as I've created a lot of the marketing materials for your stuff, been really cool to dive into what you've been doing, your whole message, and everything like that. So can you just give us kind of a little bit of a background of your whole mission, what you're doing?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on. Basically, my thing is to go out into the world and increase creativity and innovation in every facet of life. I got a new book coming out called The Solution Mindset. It's available anywhere you buy books on Amazon, Walmart, Target. You can get it now. It's in pre-order. It comes out December 30th. And that book is really about looking at the world in a positive and hopeful way. With everything going on now, everyone's so negative about everything. And this is a way to see the world in positive and uplifting, in a positive and uplifting view. So that's what the new book's about. That's what my mission's about. My work with NACM is exactly that. It is taking business to business credit and finding new ways to get excited, creative, innovative, evolution, not revolution, and coming up with these really killer ideas that help grow the business and help people, just connect in a better way. And that's what my mission's all about right now.
It's refreshing, that's for sure. As because a lot of people like you who do the kind of I wouldn't say a similar thing, but they kind of have the speaker mentality and going to different places and trying to, and as I've gone through my different employment history and I've had different companies really try to get us into those kind of things. I think a lot of people might be on the same boat with me. It's like, oh, I'm skeptical. Oh, it's another guy doing this or another thing doing that. But I do think like you and a few others really do mean business about really making some change and not just adding fluff. Cause I think a lot of people worry that that's kind of what these personas or individuals might come out of and be like, well, I got this thing for you. It's going to fix everything. But I don't see that necessarily coming from you. It's more of, I'm giving you the tools. You still got to do the work. And I was doing a little bit of research about the creator mindset, and now you talk about the other book that's coming out, which is super cool. Yeah, there you go. And so I'm gonna have a few questions. If someone wants to go read about your background, it's all over, and even in our credit conference materials, it's all there for you to look. And the biggest thing that I want to talk about right off the bat, because I'm a big technology guy, and I know technology can kind of be our hindrance as much as it's a tool. And I believe there's this thing that you mentioned about the power of like a digital detox. Is that right?
Yep.
And okay, so what role does like the micro listening play into enhancing both creativity and effective problem solving? Because as much as I'm in tech, I have tools in place to really, really limit my screen time because otherwise I'm on 3 hours of Instagram. It's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. So honestly, the latest research is not good for social media. It's just not good. There's a ton of new studies coming out that are building on previous studies that are showing social media having virtually no redeeming factor. And the factor of fear of missing out and anxiety and depression, all the way up to, horrible thoughts about humanity are really manifest in social. So the fact that you're spending 3 hours scrolling through an Insta or,
Well, it feels like that.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
good. I mean, it's just especially for children, it's like incredibly damaging. Some of the stuff that we talk about in the new book, The Solution Mindset, is 80-85% of kids that are on there experience psychological symptoms that kids should never experience. So it's particularly damaging for children, and it's particularly damaging for adults. So limiting your time is critical. I talk a lot about digital detox in terms of kind of the five stages of grief, right? Because I've done my own studies where we've taken devices away from people, and we've noticed that they go through the gamut of five stages of grief when they're away from a particular device, whatever it is. Maybe it's their phone, maybe it's their laptop, right? And the five stages tend to happen very quickly. So what ends up happening is if you take somebody's phone away and the phone's their thing or their laptop or whatever, the first thing they feel within like 30 seconds is denial. They'll give it back. I'll have it in another minute. And then, they get angry about it. They're like, oh, that sucks. I can't believe they took my thing away. And then, they start to bargain, right? Like, well, if I just were to do this, maybe they'd give me my device back. Or, hey, if I don't know. And then they get kind of depressed. They're like, wow, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And then finally comes the stage of acceptance, right? Where they're like, okay, cool. And that whole sequence takes about 2 minutes.
Yeah. I
That's
know that with myself.
that's how addicted we are to those devices. And
Yeah,
so,
we really are. We really are.
yeah,
It's just like even for me because I'm still a student, and even with, not so much with work because my work does revolve around social media, but I do notice myself like, oh, if I put like a 2 hour timer, then I don't think of it as a reward, but it is a reward at the end of the day. And for me personally, I think a lot of people, I'm trying to get out of that like consumer of just content
yeah,
because I think we're built to create. Um, but you'll never do that if you continually get into the addictive habit of that. And I just, as I was doing the research and reading about that digital detox, I'm like, yeah, it's a problem.
yeah.
As much as I love tech and I'm studying, I'm in that field of what I'm studying. I think it actually opens your eyes a lot to how damaging it can be. And we think it is definitely some generational stuff, but I also believe that all of us have an addictive nature. And now that it's available to us, we'll take advantage of it, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that once we got to go through this detox every once in a while because I think you're right. I think we do have addictive tendencies. Once we kind of do it, we realize that our brain can start solving problems that we're working on. Regardless of what it is that you're thinking about, you could start to allow your brain to do that problem solving. And that's what we really need to do more of these days, allow ourselves to disconnect from these devices. I don't know if you've been to a baseball game or a basketball game or anything lately. Everyone's on their phone the whole time, dude. They're playing right there, and everybody's
Whether they're
like
on their
this.
phone or filming it, yeah, that's like,
So it's just one of those things. The Masters gets it right because I don't know if you've ever been to the Masters in Augusta, but they don't allow phones, and it's incredible because it's so weird for the first hour, half hour, 10 minutes. You're constantly like, "Where's my phone?" And you're like, "Oh, cool! I saw something cool," and you reach for it because you want to take a picture, but they don't allow you to take your phone onto the property at all. Got to lock it in a lockbox. If you have it on you, they ask you to leave and they revoke your ticket or whatever if you pull out a phone. So it's an environment built, to connect, and it's an incredible place for many reasons, but one of them being that you can't bring your phone in there. So yes, you got a digital detox, and you got to set timers. You got to set limits for this stuff. You work in social media, you're on it all day. You got to be like, okay, 2 hours here, 1 hour there, half an hour, and be tactical about it. If you must be on it, be tactical about what you spend your time on. I need to get this out of Instagram. I need to track what the feedback on the NACM conference was from 3 months ago only on Facebook. That's a 20-minute job. Write yourself a little sheet and go for it. Put it on a post-it, and you'll become so much more efficient because you won't go down the rabbit hole of clicking on that latest dance or the latest whatever, and get sucked into 20 minutes of stuff that you don't really need.
I think one benefit of working with social media is that I really get exhausted. So by the time I'm home, I'm like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I do find myself and other people are like, well, if it's in some things I can do in the background, like if it's a podcast or if it's some music and I have really specific music that I'll listen to for studying or whatever it might be, but I'm not like dependent on it. But I know sometimes the justification or, your bargaining, I suppose, it's like, oh, well, if the podcast is in the background, I can do two things at once for this type. Like you really can't divide, at least for me, I can't divide my attention like that, and you don't get the full experience from either thing, and now you've really cheated yourself. I find that a lot for myself is
A
that
100%.
bargaining.
And it's not
Yeah.
just you. No, nobody can do two things at once. The whole multitasking thing is a myth. It's been debunked
Yeah.
now for 30 years. There's 30 years of research saying that you can't do two things at once. And the proponents always go, "Well, yeah, you can walk and talk and chew gum at the same time, right? That's doing two things at once." And it is some of the lower order stuff like that, you can do, but multitasking is a complete myth. You need to do one thing, finish it, and move on to the next. That's the quickest way to become efficient. It's not about, oh, I'm going to listen to that podcast and do this at the same time, and look at that mortgage application and do the blah blah blah. You can't. You just need to focus on one
Yeah.
thing, complete it, and then move on to the next.
I mean, when I took psychology 101, that was the first practice we did. He kind of basically had like write this word out 15 times, and one person had to write one word out completely every time, and the other person did one letter every time down the
Yeah,
list, and the other person was much, much faster.
yeah.
And I'm like, all right, that's enough to prove it to me. That's all you really need to show. But I know everything's about multitasking and this and that, and computers are great at it, but not people. We can do other things.
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
100%. It's really about finding that rhythm of doing and completing tasks. I mean, that's what it's all about. And then you notice at the end of the day, you've gained an hour and a half of time. You're like, wait, how did that happen? It's usually 6, but it's 4:30. It's like, yeah, because you did one thing and you finished it, and now you moved on to the next and finished that.
there's something I want to transition to, which obviously will still go in with the social media thing about creating and all this stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with Brene Brown.
Yep.
So she's she's got a lot of opinions and a lot of hard hitting things. But one of the things that I was listening to when I was younger, working at Chick-fil-A as a marketing director, is she mentioned that being creative is terrifying. And when I was 19 years old, I thought that was garbage. I was like, what are you talking about? The most terrifying thing. This is stupid. But I'm a creative myself. I do photography, I create videos, I do weddings, all this different stuff. And as I gotten older, I'm like, oh shoot, yeah, this is pretty terrifying. So going into that, I guess what are people's greatest like self-created barriers? Like, yes, the fear is there, but why? And how do you overcome that? And is there some truth to those barriers, or is it all just like a fallacy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think that creativity in and of itself is terrifying. I think that creativity is our human ability to solve problems getting out into the world. That's what I think it is. And the research that I've done has shown me that there are a series of genes in every human being that are dedicated towards novel problem solving, that they are literally part and parcel to who we are as people. And what I've noticed is that people throughout um, time have gotten very good at the analytics, especially NACM members. They're very, very good at the numbers and the spreadsheet logic and that kind of stuff, which I think is terrific and amazing. But they don't balance it out with a sense of creativity, a sense of innovation. So for me, it's adding creativity to your analytics just puts you in a better balance. And there's nothing terrifying about balancing your body, balancing your mind, balancing your thought. So I think without having balance, you're forever wondering why you can't get to the next level. You're forever wondering why, hey, I've been, a credit manager at this place for 20 years at B&H Photo, and I can't get to the next level. I want to get to the next level. I can't get to the next level. Why? And for me, that missing link has always been a creative and innovative way of looking at it. So, no, I do not agree whatsoever that it is a terrifying act. I think it is a human yearning to become whole, to become balanced, to become a person that is, fully able to solve problems the way that we're meant to be. I think we traded a lot of our creativity for analytics because we go to school, you get an A on a test. Oh, you got a 90 to 100. Oh, everything's broken down into numbers, right? I need to do this. Oh, it's broken down into numbers. I've accomplished this at work. Well, that's your KPI goal this year of, achieving whatever, and on and on and on and on and on. And there's nothing wrong with the analytics, but without balancing it with a sense of creativity, people get stuck. So for me, it is a manifestation of humanity trying to solve different problems that we're faced with. And for me, it's one of the most noble and incredible features that human beings can do.
Yeah, I mean, I that's where I was still kind of like, I do think it's scary to try and risk doing the thing you want to create, especially if you're individual.
Yeah.
And I think the social media part really amplifies the fallacy behind I can't do what they do. Even if you're not directly comparing, you being on there is solidifying some sort of thought in your head. I know this for sure, as I've resented a lot of my photography, and even hated the camera for a long time. And then once I got off of social media and started just physically writing things down, I'm like, oh, the ideas are there. They've always been there. Oh, I can just go do this. So the terrifying thing is, like you said, it's not. We have an ability and wanting to create and to solve problems in such a way. And with the whole analytics thing, just to comment on that, like you said, they're important and it's balance. But so many times I know, and like the things I've done and other things that people have done is, oh, you need to hit this mark, or we need to replicate this thing with that, or why did this work and that didn't? And the analytics can kind of show you that, but sometimes it's not that deep, is what I always say. Sometimes it is really just going out there and just doing it, and then you're there and ready to go. And then of course, this is just my experience, and I think a lot of people have the same thought process. I don't know if that's an unfortunate thing, but we all share a little bit of it.
Yeah, definitely. I listen, the analytics can't measure some of the most important things in life, right? So the love that a child has for their parents, right?
Hmm.
You love your mom and dad. What is that?
Right.
What's the number there? There is no number. It's ridiculous, right? The love between uh, a person and their spouse, or their animals, their dogs, their cats, whatever. Like, people love their animals. There's zero ways to measure some of the most important things. So it's the same thing at work, right? While you don't love your coworkers, you do have empathy when they have problems. And how do you measure that? You always, you could probably tell me, Nir, I had a boss, 5 years ago, and he always said this, or she always said that. And I remember, and they were the best thing ever, right? Well, how do you measure their advice, right? On a scale of 1 through 10, they gave me 9.5 levels of advice. You don't measure that. Yet those are the most fundamental things that build who we are. And those things come from a creative and innovative mindset. They don't come from an analytic mindset. That's why my work with NACM and all kinds of different financial services groups and credit card companies, I've worked with banks, national banks, I've worked with Fortune 500 lenders on very much this same topic of how to augment their beautiful, beautiful analytics. I mean, beautiful mind analytics with a bit of empathy, a bit of courage, a bit of the soft skills, a bit of mentorship, a bit of helping people out, a bit of some of the more creative attributes, so that their careers would do better, so that their companies would do better. But honestly, to make people a little bit more whole.
This podcast is brought to you by Careers in Credit. If you're an employer looking for top talent, or if you're seeking exciting career opportunities in the credit industry, Careers in Credit has you covered. They offer a range of outstanding job listings from excellent employers ready to hire. As an employer, you can effortlessly create and edit job postings, email your listings to relevant job seekers, and set up resume search alerts to find the perfect candidates for your team. Plus, you can view and print reports and statistics to keep track of your hiring progress. You mentioned the thing with the coworker and the empathy thing, and this is actually something that came up from your presentation at the conference. That one of our people that were running the whole thing was like, "I want to challenge Nir about this," and it was, "Should we have friends in the workplace?" And I believe he said you said no. And he's like, "Well, this thing from like Gallup said you should have this," and he was just very on fire about it. And I'm like, I'll ask him. So, to that, what would you expand regarding those things?
So, one of my keynote topics centers around an article I wrote for Psychology Today about a year and a half ago. And that article went viral, like millions of views and clicks, and translated in all kinds of different languages. That article was about why you should not make friends at work. And it's one of the more controversial pieces of my keynotes and my thoughts. But basically, what I think is that bestie that you have in the cube, next door, is not that excited about you getting promoted. She's just not. Right? That, friend that you have at work that's been, helping you out or whatever, is more likely helping you out because you're at the same level. And as soon as they get promoted and you don't, they'll stop talking to you. Right? We don't talk enough about workplace dynamics in terms of like, what we're really doing there. And we're not there to make friends. So I encourage people to make friends at conferences like NACM, to make friends at their church or different groups that they belong to, or, their alumni association. There's tons of places to make friends that don't have some kind of common denominator of enterprise, right? You don't have, you're not working towards getting, more people credit to buy more particular pieces of gear so that they can sell them and pay you guys back. There's none of that. There's, hey, you're hanging out with your friends and, your kids like each other because it's just pleasant and you have a lot of commonalities, right? That's where you should focus your friendship, not at work. And so a lot of people are uncomfortable by that, right? They're like, hey, I spend most of my life at work, and yeah, I genuinely made connection. But I argue that those connections are really made because you're leaning towards some type of goal. You're working on some type of accomplishment that's fiscal, right? It generally has almost always a common denominator of some kind of target for revenue or sales or whatnot. So I think you need to separate between what you do at work and what you do in your personal life in order to become more creative and more innovative, so that when you're at work, you focus at work, not on a pseudo friendship of something that you doesn't end up creating anything but drama and heartache and confusion and all kinds of things that you don't really need at work. And that's why I think that you should not make friends at work. You should make friends at the NACM conferences and different associations and different groups that you're a member of. Those are real. Those are the real friends.
Yeah. Okay. Good thing that you mentioned about like that pseudo relationship, because like as soon as you go home, I'm not saying that I don't care about my coworkers, but I can tell you I probably didn't think about them once. I don't text them afterwards. I don't, and it's not out of a heart of like hate or resent, or I don't, lack of empathy. It's just I'm now apart from my
A hundred
workplace,
percent.
and
100%.
I think when people hear that, like, "Oh, don't make a friend," is don't be nice, don't be kind. I think that sometimes what comes up, and I'm like, because when I was first introduced to that little snippet that
Uh-huh.
you said, I was like, that's what I went to. But as you explain it, I'm like, no, it's just like you said, it's you can't really confide in a person who has that common denominator because it can be switched and turned on you instantly when something changes under that denominator.
1,000%. Your friends don't switch on you, man. They're your friends. They like you. You have some common experience or hobby or whatever it is. They're not your friends at work. They're not like, and that doesn't mean you don't have to be nice to people. Of course, you have to be nice to people. You have to treat people well. You have to treat people the way that you want to be treated and all that. But there's a certain level of friendship that it just takes it to the next level. You should not be friends with your coworkers, you know? I will tell you this, when I speak about that, and I did it at the NACM in St. Louis, I literally scanned the audience, right? A couple hundred people in the room or however many, maybe even more. And I looked and I saw people going, like this, kind of waving their, agreeing big head nods. And then I saw people like sitting 2 rows over next to them going, no, no way. What a dumb thing to say. It's just a polarizing thing because people genuinely feel like, oh, I've made some relationship at work that's worthwhile. But I would argue that if you were to leave that company, you would probably not talk to that person the rest of your life.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate for just 1 second. I met my wife at Chick-fil-A for 3 years, and now, yes, we're married. So that's the one
That's
time
the
where
one
it ended up,
time
but
where
not.
you made a friend at work.
Yeah, one time, but, I can tell but all the other things were not that, and, never with the intention of that. That's like 1 in a million type of things. It's not like it can't happen, but now we don't work
Right.
together. She's just my wife,
Right.
so it is 100% different,
Well,
but
what
just
was
for
that
those
like
people
when you
who
guys
wanna.
were there together?
So interestingly enough, I was her director as
Oh, here we go.
I wasn't her directing director. But I was still of leadership above her. And my boss at the time and we talked about like how we would like if there was an issue, I'd just go to another director and have them deal with it. But at some point, and I won't go too much into detail, there's something that happened and I wasn't allowed input because of her being involved, not necessarily in her in a negative way, just I just wasn't allowed to be part of the conversation, which then in my opinion was like, well, that seems unfair.
Right.
Um, but see, that's the thing. And so then we kind of I stayed there, she left, and now we're married. And then we worked in as a photography business together. And I feel like that's probably different because we don't have employees.
Right.
But even then, like there's part of that where you kinda have to how do you differentiate your work day in that versus coming home from work and now being husband and wife versus coworkers or co-owners of whatever.
I think you
So,
would agree with me that that relationship was at best, you know, tricky at work and difficult to navigate.
yeah, because a lot of things weren't being said from other coworkers, but you can kinda hear it loud in your head
This is all the
or with
stuff
their
that I
lips.
want people to avoid, right? And that's why I kind of say this because when you're busy navigating those types of occurrences, you're not being creative, you're not being innovative, you're not tapping into your innate ability to solve problems. Oh gosh, you're in another meeting with somebody and they're like, you can't talk because HR won't let you. So I help people avoid those situations.
Right. No, that's good, and, I can see the room for sure of the nodding and the shaking of heads as, I kinda know just people, but those personas and personalities behind the faces for sure. I wanted to jump in. I had a question about everything about the creative mind and how to, utilize that. Um, it's kind of like a two-parter, but it says, "What are the hiccups that companies or leaders need to break out of in regards to allowing creativity for the team, but without the team feeling hesitancy to do
Yeah.
so?" Because I think there's managers who say, "Hey, you can be creative, do your thing," but it doesn't really feel like you have that freedom. So for the leaders, how do they combat that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're not always going to have a good boss in life, right? You're not always going to have somebody who's going to help you and who wants you to be creative and innovative at work and who wants you to take chances on ideas. It's just not going to happen. So, one thing that I recommend that people do is that they do the assignment twice. Now, this is another controversial part of the keynote and something that I talk about in my new book, The Solution Mindset, out by Wiley and Sons. Anywhere you buy books, it's on Amazon now. Get a pre-order copy. Is that I ask people to do the assignment twice. Now, what do I mean? I know we're all triple booked. I know we have 600 things to do all day, and we barely have enough time to get the work that we need to get done. I know. But let's say you do an assignment, right? And maybe that assignment is a quarterly report or a QBR, a quarterly business review, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But you do it a certain way every year, right? Every quarter, you got to put the pie chart here, and you got to break it down in these three ways, and you write a paragraph about it, and then at the bottom, it's like a few more pie charts and like one sort of metric line or whatever. You do it that way every time, and your boss it tells you, hey, just do it like this. And you tell him or her, hey, I got a different idea. And they're like, just do it the way I told you and get it done. So you have a choice when you are working with a solution mindset. The choice is just get it done the way that they want it to, or do it your way and the way that they want it to get done. So let's say you're like, forget the pie chart. Let's just write this paragraph and take a really funny meme from the internet, and that will convey the thought that I want for this particular review. And so I encourage people to do both assignments. Do the one for your boss that's requiring it, and then do the fun one or the one that you feel like you're getting creative expression out in. And what ends up happening is that 9 out of 10 times, seriously, your boss will look at that and go, man, this is 10 times better than what we're doing. I want to do what you've suggested. Or they're like, take that picture, blah, 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 combine it with this, put that on the front. They'll do some kind of combination 9 out of 10 times. 1 out of 10 times, you'll have the a-hole boss who will be like, forget it, just do it the way I want. But what ends up happening is even if you go down that route, you have personally satisfied your innate ability to become creative, and you have personally like kind of scratched that itch that your ancestors have been kind of getting at you the whole time. So you're happier, you're in a better mood, and when you are a more positive person, you attract like minds. So you go to the NACM conference and you talk to somebody and you go, man, my boss is such an asshole. Like, look at the report. They made it, you do it this way, but I wanted to do it this way. And you show it to them on your phone and they go, dude, do you need a job or what? Because we love that. Come work with us. And all of a sudden, because you're positive, because you're creative, you've made opportunities. You don't make no opportunities for yourself by being negative, down on my boss sucks, this sucks, oh, everybody's out against, everyone's out to get me, and my boss is against everything I do and all this stuff. It leads nowhere. It leads to frustration and anxiety. You get depressed, you get angry. What good does that do? So I encourage people to use their own skills to do assignments twice. And I realize that that's ridiculous sounding. But when you actually do it, you realize that, wow, this is an amazingly liberating exercise because now I could do things the way that I want to do it. And sometimes it's a little scary because, like, you think you're so much better than the way that things have been doing. Things have been, practice. And when you actually practice it yourself, you're like, wait a second, maybe this is a better idea. Right. So
Right.
there is that risk, but you never know until you try it.
Yeah, I'm glad that I've listened to a lot of some of your social media shorts, things on LinkedIn or Instagram, things like that. And something you mentioned, even just what you're saying now, is about you could like do the same thing over and over and be negative and get the anxiety and all this. And we all know those people and we all have worked with them or we've all been that person. Um, I know I have in the past, but now it's like I thought I was the only one who, because I look weird when I stand out and I'll do the same thing that you mentioned is do both versions or do something new or try something different. And I've had people say like, well, what's the point? Why even try doing that when you know they're going to say no? And I'm like, well, I just doesn't work well with me. But in the past, I've done that. So it's nice to hear coming from someone who's experienced really high level thinkers or from different companies that we all know that we're all people and we all have the same thoughts a lot of times. And to come out and to just say, yeah, do both versions allow yourself to be creative, allow yourself to show. And honestly, what you're doing is also showing like, hey, you see your original wasn't that great. Here's mine,
Yep.
and you can just see it in front of you instead of it being conceptual. Just doing it and having it in front of you. So that's just more of a response from me to what you've said in the past and just now. And because I think a lot of people did build a vendetta against somebody, or they had built resentments, or the this or that. And I'm
Yeah,
like, what's the
which
point?
has no value at work. You think it does, but it
Yeah,
has no value. Jonathan, I've hired 1,000 people in my career. 1,000 people. I've sat and interviewed, hired 1,000 people. McGraw Hill made me count when I published the Creator Mindset because I put it in there. They redlined it. It went all the way to the editors. Editors call me. We get on a meeting, 15-minute Zoom meeting, or Teams to talk about how to verify this count because you can't just put stuff in books. I mean, you can if you self-publish, but not with the major publisher. So I had to go and look through my filing cabinets and like count. Anyway, 1,000 people I've hired, a little bit more actually. And I got to tell you that there are a lot of people out there who think that they're smarter than their boss. It's fantastic. Fantastic. But when I tell them to do this assignment, say, no problem. You see how it's done today? You have a better idea? Yes. Way better. My idea is so much better. Go do it. Let's see what comes out. There are a fair amount of those people that just can't. They just can't come up with the idea. They either don't have a better one, or they're not working hard enough, or they genuinely just want to complain. And so the side effect of something like this is that when you complain about this particular boss or this particular assignment, or why are we doing things this way, if you then go and try to do it your own way and you succeed, or you get somewhere that's better than what you have to do, you get really excited about it. And that excitement, it carries throughout. It makes you incredibly valuable to other companies. And, people even at work are like, wow, the way, Jonathan's doing it was excellent. Right. And then if you can't do it, you humble yourself a little bit and you go, cool, man, I need to learn more before I kind of open my mouth and go, oh, I want to go atomic on this thing. The way we've been doing it is horrible. Okay, cool. Try it yourself. And then you fail or you can't get it done right. I think it's a blessing in disguise. I think it's a wonderful thing, right? It's a opportunity to learn more, do a little bit more deep diving. Where did I fail? I failed on the pie chart because the way that they did it, the way that I do it is totally different. Cool. Double down on the accounting, double down on the finance, learn all of those intricacies to get that value, that data to appear in that way. Cool. Once you learn that, try again and again and again. And eventually you'll come up with a better way. But if you don't come up with a better way, maybe it's time to humble yourself a little bit, not complain all the time that things aren't going the way
yeah,
that you want them to go.
right. It's very easy to just backseat drive couch quarterback, coaching.
100%.
It's easy to do that, and I've done it. I
Me
mean,
too.
obviously with sports, um, but like you said, you get excited, even more excited when things do work, and you're like, well, I know sometimes people can jump into like, oh, well, they don't know how hard I did work, but I think once you get to the point of doing it, it doesn't matter because you're like, I've gotten the thing that I said I was gonna do, and I've done it well. Um, just really quick, before we kind of close off, I'm trying to think of. I have two questions here, but I'm going to stick with one. Um, what is the number one enemy of creativity? I know we kind of talked about this, and what is one simple like physical thing or practice that someone can do for the people who are listening or watching, to get their creative engine started, so to speak?
Great question. I believe the number one enemy of creativity is negativity, right? It's when we're negative and down about things. When we're negative and down, we do not solve problems, we just create more problems. And when we're positive and uplifting, we look at the world at a sense of possibility, a sense of wonder, a sense of, hey, this can be solved. The new book, The Solution Mindset, again, available anywhere you buy books. Amazon has it right now, Walmart, Target, all the fine retailers, Barnes and Noble. literally looks at 10 people around the world that are changing the game with creativity, right? We were dealing with some of the world's worst problems, from you know uh, global pollution to the healthcare crisis, to unemployment for disabled people. Everything is in the book. Overforestation, all of that's in the book. And there are amazing people out there using positivity to overcome these issues. There is no issue that humanity has ever created. From the hole in the ozone, I don't know if you remember that. You're a little young to remember, but there was a hole in the ozone. It's going to kill everybody. And then creativity and innovation and a bunch of really great scientists solved that, got rid of a certain chemical. Now there's no more hole in the ozone. So the human ingenuity is incredible. And there is no problem that we can't solve without being creative. But we need to be positive in order to tap into that creativity. And so, the one thing your listeners can do right now is try to control their language. We have studied the English language and found that it has a 6-to-1 ratio of negative to positive words, meaning that for every great, there is horrible, terrible, sucks, bad. There's 6 ways to pronounce something as being negative. We did the research, and it turns out that, our caveman and cavewoman ancestors were like, don't eat that grape. It's horrible. You're going to die. It's terrible. Right. On and on and on, as a life saving method. But fast forward to today, you're on a Teams call and somebody showed you something and you're like, that sucks. And it's that same embedded, DNA that has led to the death of creativity and innovation. So, one thing I encourage your listeners to do is change your language. Start using more positive words. If you notice you're texting a coworker and you're like, "This sucks. I, can't wait for this meeting to be over. It's a snore fest." No, change your language. Change the way you approach it. Hey, are you getting anything out of this meeting at this time? Because it feels like it's really not going where it needs to go. Or what can we do to make this meeting a little bit better? Right? Changing that mindset from this sucks to how do we make it better? Incredible value. And it's something that costs $0, and it's something that people can do right this minute to improve their workspace. They can do it right after they hear this podcast. They can go and say, okay, cool, I'm replying to an email and it's like, I need a vendor to send me an invoice. Send me the invoice right now. You can either send that to them or say, hey, how can I help you get this invoice done quicker? And they go, oh, how cool. Like, I have a partner. And they'll tell you, oh, this is great. Can we change this in the accounting system? And you go, yes, what else can I do to help you? I want to help you. And they go, this is the nicest person ever. They go, you know what? I have an inventory. I have a warehouse full of parts. You guys want it from last year? It's the same parts that B&H used to buy and that, that we don't need funding for. And you go, yes. And then creativity ends up, and positivity ends up like kind of just multiplying itself if you just use it. Negativity gets you nowhere. Positivity opens doors.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100%. Feel that a lot, even in my individual endeavors with my own creative stuff. It's like, it's hard to bounce back on yourself. So that's why I have my wife to help me, not reinforce my positivity, but clarify it. Because sometimes my thoughts are needed to be corrected. But 100%, and then you start going and going and going, and paired with the detoxing of social media, the understanding what the creative part is and how that is the innovative part. All these things coming together 100%. Just, of course, I agree with, but just hearing it from someone like you who's studied and done the homework and everything like that, I'm always looking to find people who have real data and a real passion behind what they're saying
Yeah.
rather than just making it like a business for themselves, because when we see it we know it. And I remember, as I'm putting all the marketing materials for the different conferences, I had your stuff and a few other speakers, and it's very, very cool to see who they are able to grab and then see it and manifest it in a conference live, and just kind of know the person that you are, who they are in that. So um thank you, Nir, for just taking some time to talk to me and to the the listeners hear about what you do and
Thank you, Jonathan. Really
the
appreciate it.
missions that you're trying to. Yeah, 100%. Um, is there anything last thing that you want to say before I kind of close this
Just
out?
please go get a copy of the new book. It's a really,
Okay.
really special one called The Solution Mindset. It's available on Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble. It'll be everywhere, but you can get your pre-order copy now, which is really fun, and it'll ship to your house when it comes out on December 30th.
Awesome. I'll be grabbing one, that's for sure. And I'm not just saying that. I genuinely want one, so I'll be doing that. Well, thank you again, Nir.
Appreciate it, buddy.